What if the reason you're not moving forward financially is not your salary, but the way you're paying for your life? Not how much things cost, but how comfortably those costs are broken into monthly payments. Because today, almost everything can be turned into a small, manageable number, and that number rarely feels dangerous. A house isn't a $400,000 decision anymore. It's a $1,900 monthly commitment. A car isn't $30,000. It's $450 a month. A phone, a vacation, even furniture, all quietly reduced to numbers that feel acceptable, almost harmless. And this is where the problem begins. Because when everything is framed monthly, your brain stops seeing the full picture. You stop asking, "Is this expensive?" and start asking, "Can I handle this payment?" At first, it feels like progress. You move into a better place. You drive a more reliable car. You upgrade things that make life easier, more comfortable, more modern. Nothing extreme, nothing irresponsible, just small, reasonable improvements, one payment at a time. But over the years, something subtle starts to happen. Your income increases, but your freedom doesn't. Every raise gets absorbed. Every extra dollar finds a place to go. Not because you're careless, but because the system makes it easy to commit that money in advance. And eventually, you reach a point where your financial life feels full. Not overflowing, not collapsing, just full. There's no space to take a risk, no space to step back from work, no space to handle a disruption without stress. And yet, from the outside, everything looks fine. Bills are paid on time, the lifestyle is stable, nothing appears broken. But underneath, there's a quiet pattern. Most of your future income is already spoken for. Before the month even begins, a large portion of what you will earn has already been assigned to past decisions. And that's the part people rarely stop to examine, because nothing about it feels urgent. There's no crisis, no dramatic mistake, just a series of reasonable choices that slowly reduce your flexibility. And over time, that lack of flexibility becomes something more serious. It becomes a limit on what you can do next. You may want to invest more, but there's no room. You may want to change careers, but the payments don't pause. You may want to slow down, but the system keeps moving. So the real question isn't whether you're earning enough, it's this: how much of your life have you already committed in the form of monthly payments? Because once those commitments stack up, they don't just shape your budget, they shape your decisions, your risks, and ultimately, your future. And most people don't realize this until years have already passed. Let's slow this down and look at a life that feels very normal. Not extreme, not careless, just familiar. Imagine someone in their early 40s. They've done most things right. They studied, found a stable job, and stayed consistent. Over time, their income grew to a level that feels respectable. After taxes, they bring home around $4,500 a month. Not wealthy, but not struggling either. Now look at how that income is structured. The largest piece goes to housing. Rent or mortgage, about $1,600. It's a decent place, safe neighborhood, close to work, nothing luxurious but comfortable enough to feel like progress. Then comes transportation. Car payment, $450. It's not a luxury car, just something reliable, maybe slightly newer than necessary, but justified as a long-term decision. Insurance adds another $300. Already, without anything unusual, we're at $2,350. Now add the basics of daily life. Groceries and utilities around $700. Electricity, water, heating, food, nothing optional here. Just the cost of maintaining a normal routine. Subscriptions, phone, internet, another $200. Streaming services, a decent phone plan, home internet, standard for modern living. Now the total reaches $3,250. At this point, nothing stands out as a mistake. Everything feels reasonable. But we're not done yet, because most people don't live without past financial commitments. Credit card payments, $300. Not out-of-control debt, just balances that built up gradually. Travel, emergencies, small upgrades. Student loan, $250. A decision made years ago, still quietly present every month. Maybe there's also a financed phone, furniture, or appliance. That's another $150. Now the total is $3,950. From a $4,500 income, that leaves about $550. And this is where things become interesting, because that remaining $550 is not just extra money, it's everything else. Unexpected medical expenses, car repairs, helping family, occasional dining out, clothing, any form of leisure or flexibility. And most months, that buffer doesn't stay intact. It gets used, quietly, gradually. So at the end of the month, there's very little left. Not zero, but not enough to meaningfully change the future. This person isn't making reckless decisions. They're not overspending wildly. They're not ignoring responsibilities. In fact, they're doing what most people would call financially responsible. And that's exactly why this situation is so important to understand. Because this is not a story of failure. It's a system that produces a very specific outcome, a life that feels stable but doesn't build momentum. Income comes in, payments go out. Every month looks similar to the last. There's no major crisis, but there's also no significant progress. And over time, this pattern becomes normal, so normal that it rarely gets questioned. Not because it's ideal, but because it's common. And that's what makes it powerful. Because when something feels normal, you stop asking whether it's actually working. At this point, it's easy to assume the issue is personal. Maybe spending habits, maybe a lack of discipline, maybe just the cost of living. But if you look a little closer, something else starts to appear. A system. Not a conspiracy, not something dramatic, just a very well-designed environment where almost everything is structured to be paid monthly. Think about how you encounter prices today. Rarely as full amounts, almost always as smaller divided numbers. Car dealerships don't lead with the total price, they lead with the monthly payment. Phone companies don't say, "This costs $1,200, they say, "It's just $50 a month." Even furniture stores, travel websites, and medical services now offer easy monthly plans. The message is always the same. Don't focus on the total, focus on what fits into your month. And on the surface, that feels helpful. It makes things accessible. It removes the need to save up front. It allows people to enjoy things earlier in life. But there's a trade-off hidden inside that convenience. Because when everything becomes a monthly decision, you stop seeing your financial life as a whole. You start seeing it in fragments. One payment here, another there, each one small enough to justify, each one reasonable on its own. But combined, they create something much larger, a fixed structure around your income. And once that structure is in place, it doesn't adjust easily. Your income might change, your priorities might shift, but the payments remain, month after month, quietly consistent. This is where the system becomes powerful. It doesn't need you to overspend dramatically. It just needs you to agree repeatedly, to say yes to manageable numbers. Because every time you accept a new monthly obligation, you're not just spending money, you're committing future income. Income that hasn't been earned yet, but is already assigned to past decisions. And that's the part people rarely stop to examine. Because nothing about it feels urgent. There's no crisis, no dramatic mistake, just a series of reasonable choices that slowly reduce your flexibility. And over time, that lack of flexibility becomes something more serious. It becomes a limit on what you can do next. You may want to invest more, but there's no room. You may want to change careers, but the payments don't pause. You may want to slow down, but the system keeps moving. So the real question isn't whether you're earning enough, it's this: how much of your life have you already committed in the form of monthly payments? Because once those commitments stack up, they don't just shape your budget, they shape your decisions, your risks, and ultimately, your future. And most people don't realize this until years have already passed. Let's slow this down and look at a life that feels very normal. Not extreme, not careless, just familiar. Imagine someone in their early 40s. They've done most things right. They studied, found a stable job, and stayed consistent. Over time, their income grew to a level that feels respectable. After taxes, they bring home around $4,500 a month. Not wealthy, but not struggling either. Now look at how that income is structured. The simple math most people ignore. At some point, all of this comes down to numbers. Not complex financial models, not advanced strategies, just simple math that most people never stop to fully calculate. Because monthly payments are designed to feel small, we rarely step back and look at their total impact over time. Let's go back to something very common, a $450 car payment. On its own, it doesn't feel extreme. For many, it feels completely reasonable. Now stretch that across 5 years. $450 multiplied by 60 months. That's $27,000. And that's just the base payment. It doesn't include higher insurance costs for a financed vehicle. It doesn't include interest paid over the life of the loan. It doesn't include maintenance, repairs, or depreciation. Realistically, that one decision can easily cross $35,000 for something that, over time, is losing value. Now, pause for a moment. Not to judge the decision, but to simply observe the scale. Because this is where the perspective shifts. That same $450, if it were not committed to a payment, could exist as an option to save, an option to invest, an option to wait. Now imagine that $450 being set aside each month instead. Over 5 years, yes, it's still $27,000, but the difference is it's yours, uncommitted, flexible. And if extended further, the gap becomes more meaningful. Over 10 years, $450 a month becomes $54,000 in contributions alone. But money doesn't just sit still. Even with modest growth, that amount begins to compound. Not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily, quietly. And this is the part that often gets overlooked. Monthly payments don't just reduce what you have today, they redirect what could have grown tomorrow. Every dollar committed to a fixed obligation is a dollar that cannot participate in future growth. And when this happens across multiple areas, a car, a phone, furniture, credit cards, the effect compounds in the opposite direction. Not building, but limiting. What makes this especially subtle is the timing. The cost of a payment is immediate, but the cost of lost opportunity is delayed. You don't feel it next month. You don't notice it next year. It shows up much later, when you realize that despite years of steady income, there isn't much accumulated to show for it. And that realization can be confusing, because from the outside, everything seemed fine. Income was consistent, spending felt controlled, but the math was quietly working in the background, not against you in an obvious way, but in a slow, predictable direction, toward maintenance rather than progress. This isn't about avoiding every payment. Some are necessary, some are practical, but the key difference lies in awareness, understanding that every monthly commitment has a total cost and a future cost. And when those costs are ignored, the outcome isn't sudden financial failure, it's something much quieter. A life where most of your financial energy is spent sustaining what you already have, instead of building what comes next.